Hola! Welcome to spooky season! Happy Halloween! Boo to the ween! It's scary time! It's scary season. It is October, and this is the first Berenstain Bears Deep in Bear Country episode of the spooky season. As you can see, I've got my Halloween shirt on. It's hard to tell, but it has like spooky cats on it and stuff. I've got my usual spooky books behind me. Nothing's changed. Absolutely nothing's changed. It's the same setup I always have. But it's spooky season, so I can do a spooky voice and we can cover some spooky stories here on Deep in Bear Country. There's no poem at the beginning of this book, so let's just get right into it. All right? In Bear Country, a Berenstain Bearcast. I am your host, Phil Gonzalez, and this week we are covering a book that I actually really am very fond of. It came out in 2020, so, at the height of sort of people being shut in. It is a reprint, a reissuing of classic illustrations with a new narrative, which I'm always a big fan of because we're getting those Stan and Jan pictures out there, and it's based on one of the best books in the Berenstain Bears Classics line, so it's got that going for it. And it's a board book, which usually is wonky, but because this one has such great classic illustrations and still tells a compelling narrative, even though it cuts most of the plot of the original story out, I'm a big fan of it. What is our Halloween choice this week? Why, it is the Berenstain Bears Halloween is Sweet. That's a huge spoiler, by the way, on the cover. It's Halloween is Sweet. Yes, we figure out that Halloween is sweet throughout the course of this story. That's fine. This is a board book. It's a book for little kids. I've actually got my copy of it right here just to prove to you that it's a board book. Look at that. It's hard as a rock. You can't deny it. This is a board book. I'm having to use photos of the interior because this is not released digitally. This is strictly for those who want a stiff cardboard book in their hands. Otherwise, I guess you're just stuck with the original, which is fine because the original's a great book also. This is the Berenstain Bears Halloween is Sweet. I don't have any lessons for you this week. I don't have anything to teach you about the history of Halloween. We've covered the history of Halloween. Check out my other episodes if you want to know about the history of Halloween. That's fine. This isn't about the history of trick-or-treating. This isn't about the history of costumes. This is just about what have they done with the original book to turn it into this book. Does it work? Is the story still good? I already spoiled it right off the bat. Yes, this is still a good book. But let's take a look at what this book is and what this book is based on. So 2020 is the Berenstain Bears Halloween is Sweet, and even credits down at the bottom by Stan and Jan Berenstain. It doesn't say with Mike Berenstain or anything. I assume because Mike wants to give the full credit to his parents, but let's be clear. The interior of this book has been rewritten, I assume by Mike. I don't know who else would have rewritten it, but this is not the text from the original story. So let's take a look. It's almost Halloween in Bear Country, and brother and sister are excited. They want to carve a giant pumpkin. That medium-sized one will do, says Papa. Now, the opening spread of this book is the only non-sourced from the main source of this book. This is the only spread that is not in the source material. I don't know where this picture came from. Is it from the Berenstain Bears? Is it the Double Dare? I'm not sure. It's a picture of Papa and the Cubs in a pumpkin patch. So it couldn't be from the Double Dare because they don't have their own pumpkin patch in Double Dare. Mom is in the background calling to them, but it's not from the source. Now, what is the source? I keep mentioning the source. The source for this week's book is the Berenstain Bears Trick or Treat. That's a classic. We love it. It's from the early 80s. It's a first-time book, a Stan and Jan classic. This is the one that introduces the character of Ms. McGrizz. It introduces Too Tall and the gang as the bullies that they are, the town ruffians. It has one of the greatest covers of any Berenstain Bears book. We have just the Cubs looking terrified. We have scary trees. Mama and Papa in the background clueless. Now, the Berenstain Bears Trick or Treat is really a book about getting to know your neighbors, learning that looks can be deceiving, learning that Halloween is really a time to have fun and not really a time to terrify small children. And it also involves TPing, which I think we discussed when I first covered this book about 9.5 years ago. So the Berenstain Bears Trick or Treat is a classic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk us through the elements of the new book versus the elements of the old book and see how they've been repurposed or if they've been just completely same purpose and not even repurposed, just purpose. They've been purposed for, their original purpose may be part of the deal here. So I don't know, whatever. But I don't know where this picture comes from. Listeners in listenerland, viewers in viewerhood ship, where does this original picture come from? I can flip through my old first time books, but you know what? I'm not going to, because it's scary season. And you know what's really scary? Not putting in all the work I probably should have. So we have this one image that we don't know where it's from, but immediately we have Papa is carving a pumpkin, and the cubs, Papa turns to the cubs and he says, "Grr, Halloween is scary," says Sister. So this is our theme. We're going to have Sister and the cubs making assumptions about Halloween, a holiday which presumably they've celebrated before, and Mama subverting them. Subverting what those expectations are, subverting the attitude. So the first off the bat, we have Papa making a scary face at the cubs, and Mama saying, and Sister saying Halloween is scary. Where does this image come from? It comes from the original story, the scene where Mama and Papa are discussing whether or not it's smart for the cubs to be trick-or-treating by themselves. And that's pretty much it. Papa turns and makes a scary face at them, and Mama's just like, look, we should let the kids go trick-or-treating on their own. That's it. He just startles them with a scary face. In the new version of the book, Sister is scared by the scary face. Also, the new version edits Mama out of the image. There's a sort of disconcerted looking Mama in the original illustration, and they've removed her from it. So moving on, Sister's like, Halloween is scary, and Brother's like, no, it isn't. He draws a map of the neighborhood. Can't wait to go trick-or-treating with his friends, and he holds it up and he's like, no, it isn't. Halloween's exciting. So that's Brother's attitude about Halloween. Now, the whole idea of mapping out where you're going for Halloween is great. It is, of course, straight from the original. Brother has drawn a map, planned out their trick-or-treating route. They're going to go to their house, Freddie and Lizzie's, Queenie's. Then they're going to go to Farmer Ben's. They're going to go to Mrs. Grizzle's. And then he says that he's going to go to Teacher Jane's and Dr. Grizzly's, even though she gives out health snacks, which is very fun. Now, we've cut all that, of course, from the new version. We just have Brother making the map. It's the same spread, exactly. Brother's making his map. He shows it off to Mama, but he just says that Halloween is exciting. And you know what, Brother? Halloween is exciting. So far we've had scary. We've had exciting. They see that it's dark outside, and Mama's like, hey, kids, it's time to put on your trick-or-treat costumes. This is an interesting edit. So in the original book, Brother is like, I know one place we're not going to go. We're not going to go to Ms. McGrizz's house. And he points out the window at this creepy house that's like across the way from them. What they've done is they've taken Mike, I assume, has taken the image of Brother pointing out of a brightly lit window and edited, put in some creepy trees in the background. Just so that Brother can point out the window and simply say it's getting dark outside, so that Mama says, time to put on your costumes. And she's holding their costumes and she's kind of waving her finger at them. And the cubs are like, yay. And I was like, that doesn't happen in the original version. I don't remember where that comes from. In the original book, it is an admonishment by Mama to be careful, to stay in their own neighborhood, don't eat any of the treats until they come back home, and to stay with their friends. And so instead of just saying it's getting late, time to put on your costumes, which fits perfectly, they've actually taken this original illustration where Mama was reminding them to be safe on Halloween and sort of interpolated it into this new narrative, which I think is great. I am astounded, I'm not astounded. This isn't rocket science, but I am delighted at Mike taking this original narrative and doing a remix on it. It's really a remix of the original, where you've taken the original elements and you've sort of mushed them all around and created something sort of new, and worth its own time. A standalone piece of narrative, as opposed to I'm just condensing this story down into a short board book. So he's mixing the pictures around. They're restructuring the story. As you can probably tell, it's delightful. It's very Halloween. So Mama's like, it's getting late, put on your costumes, and the cubs are very excited, as well they should be. Halloween's coming up. Here's a cool one. So Sister is dressed as a ballerina, Brother's a monster, and Brother says, see, Halloween isn't scary, it's fun. And we've got a shot of Sister Bear standing in first position, kind of. It's like sort of first position and a half dab, and then Brother crouching down behind a chair, dressed up in his monster costume. He doesn't have the mask on yet. And I was like, well, I know this is from the original, and it is from the original, but it's from the very beginning of the original book. And in it, we're discussing how brother and sister are going to play a trick on Mama. Mama is out buying stuff for Halloween. She's buying trick-or-treat candy. And so brother and sister are planning on spooking her by jumping out and scaring her. And brother is crouching down behind the chair, and sister is not, I mean, she's just standing there with in first position with a half dap. But what they've done is they've actually taken, and this works really well, they've taken the original spread where brother is on the left because he's the focal point. He's in the original version. You're looking at brother getting ready to jump out and scare Mama, and then sister is on the right. And there's some negative space over for the original dialogue and the original paragraph and narration in the original photo. I know I'm babbling a lot, but this is really cool to me. What they've done is they've taken that original spread and they've flipped it on its axis. So now it is mirror. It's a mirror image, which of course makes, and they've zoomed in a bit. They've tightened it up. So its focus is now completely on sister, because she is the one who has apprehensions about Halloween. And now brother is on the right side, crouched down. And the way it's laid out, he's less of the focus. It looks just like he's creeping around like a monster and having a good time. And because he's responding to sister and saying, see, Halloween isn't scary. Halloween is fun. He's still got his finger up to his lips. Like, be quiet, it's still that Mama's coming thing. So it doesn't, there's another big example coming up of the context being lost from the original illustration. No one will notice unless they're comparing, but it's definitely there. So then we have brother and sister. They're going to reach for a treat from Mama's grocery basket before going out. And Mom's like, only one. We need those for the trick-or-treaters. So visit us tonight. And brother's like, Halloween is yummy. Sister agrees. Now, these illustrations were originally used on one page in the original book. And it's from when Mama first arrives home. And they're not talking about, well, it kind of, so in the original, Mama's talking about how looks can be deceiving. That's the thing. So brother's not really a monster. Looks can be deceiving. And brother gets excited about the candy he sees, and Mama doesn't let him have a single treat in the original version. She's just like, hands off. These are trick-or-treaters candies, who will come to our house tomorrow night. That's the thing. That's another thing. So the new version of the story is set on Halloween night. The old version is set the night before Halloween and then into Halloween. Like then it jumps to the next day. This is all prep work. So, a condensing of the storyline. But it keeps the images the same. It is changed the layout slightly so it covers 2 pages instead of 1. A noble edit. It still works. It's still a great illustration. I just love these old first-time book illustrations. They're great. Then their friends arrive. And they don't name the friends off. That's not important here. They go to Crooked Lane. Halloween is spooky, says sister. No, it isn't, says brother. Halloween is, and this is where I want to point out a few things in the reused illustration. So the first illustration is of Cousin Fred et al. Showing up at their house. They're all in costumes. We have a pirate. We have a skeleton. We have the evil queen from Snow White. I believe the pirate is Freddy and the skeleton is Lizzie. I could be wrong. I believe the queen is Queenie. Let's check the original version and see if it gives us any clues as to whose are am whose. Who is who shows up as what, why, and wherefore. Why, it does, actually. Everybody knows not to go to Ms. McGrizz's house because she's a witch. That is not mentioned in our new version, but there's a skeleton, the Wicked Queen from Snow White. We don't really, okay, I guess it doesn't tell us who is who. Does it tell us later in the narrative? Nope, they just leave the house. It's Freddy, Lizzie, and Queenie. So I assume because that's the order they were presented in, a skeleton, a Wicked Queen, no, a pirate, a skeleton, a Wicked Queen, I believe that is Freddy, Lizzie, and Queenie. Like, that's the order that they list the costumes in. So I was right. I just want to go on record as saying I was correct. I know exactly what I'm talking about at all times. Now, in the original book, they run into Too Tall and his gang. Too Tall doesn't waste any time trying to get brother, sister, and their friends to go along with him and his gang. I also want to point out just how wonderful, just how delightful the original illustrations are at conveying darkness in the neighborhood without overdoing it. Just the muted colors, the cross-hatching for the shading, the darker tones. This is gorgeous children's book illustration. And I'm so glad that Mike was able to reuse some of it for the new version. I say some of it because it's not all of it, because so Too Tall and the gang show up. They're like, come on with us. We got some fun to do. And they head up Crooked Lane. Now, in the original illustration, brother is being cajoled into this by Too Tall. And so when they hit Crooked Lane and sister gets kind of scared, Too Tall has his arm around brother. Now, this illustration is reused in the new version, but we don't have any context as for suddenly why Too Tall is there and why he has his arm around brother's shoulder. So If you're not looking for it, you won't notice it. If you're not looking for it, you won't notice it. But once you realize that's what's happening in the story, you suddenly are aware that Too Tall is in the picture. Now, they're heading for Crooked Lane. Sister says Halloween is spooky. Brother says, no, it isn't. Halloween is scary. And this is the next hilarious part, because in the original story, Too Tall and the gang intentionally go to Ms. McGrizz's house. And the reason they intentionally go to Ms. McGrizz's house is because they're going to toilet paper the house. They're going to play some tricks. They're going to put the trick back into Trick or Treat. He said, first, we'll decorate her house with a little of this. Holds up the toilet paper. We'll tie a few knots in her clothesline. We'll smear some honey on her broomstick so she'll stick to it when she tries to fly. Because remember, in the original, they firmly believe that Ms. McGrizz was a witch, a neighborhood witch. I had, who was my guest for this show? I believe this was Aaron Shepard, this first year of my show. And we talked about the concept of the neighborhood witch, the idea that every neighborhood had the old woman who they thought was a witch. And that's a recurring theme in classic children's Halloween books, which is, I mean, it's in Arthur, it's in everything, which is there's an old woman at the end of our block. We know she's a witch, and the whole point of the story is to realize the woman's not a witch. Like, the woman's not a witch. That's if you learn nothing else from children's books about Halloween, it's the old woman's not actually a witch. She's actually really cool. Now, they introduce Ms. McGrizz here. Scary, sweet Ms. McGrizz. They give away already that Ms. McGrizz is sweet. Sweet Ms. McGrizz had accidentally scared them all, but she was very kind, so there was no need to be afraid. However, in the two-page spread that they've included, the original spread, they haven't deleted out a major piece of plot point, which is the original toilet paper that Too Tall was carrying. As you can see in the original script, Too Tall is startled by Ms. McGrizz, and he drops the toilet paper, sort of goes flying out of his hands, and it's very big, it's large, it's very clearly there, like it's floating in front of him, this roll of toilet paper with a long streamer of toilet paper coming out of it. Without that context, though, it just looks like, I don't know, a spectral roll of toilet paper came flying out of the house at the Cubs when they showed up. I'm not sure. And it's also worth noting that in the original, Ms. McGrizz opens up her door and she says, "Aha! I'm ready for you." Which is, of course, misinterpreted as her being a witch. She's not a witch. She's just Ms. McGrizz. Let that be a lesson for everyone. So they go inside. It says Ms. McGrizz invited everyone inside where she had candy apples waiting for them. Yeah, wow, said Sister. Halloween is fun. You're right, said Brother. That's it. We get a spread of Ms. McGrizz showing the kids all the candy apples and her bidding fond farewell to them as they leave. Now, in the original story, there's, of course, a little bit more plot going on. She ushers them inside. And this is where the original lesson is learned, which is that looks can be deceiving. Ms. McGrizz really is a sweet, kind old person, but it seems in the new version of the story, we are already comfortable with that fact. We know Ms. McGrizz is a nice person. She just accidentally startled them. So we have the original illustration, which is exactly the same. It's the same two-page spread. In the board book, it's cropped in a little closer, so you lose some of the Cubs on the edges, but it's still the same. It's the same basic spread, and you've still got Ms. McGrizz. They haven't done anything to the illustrations, which I really appreciate. One thing I really like about Ms. McGrizz, and I've always been a fan of with this book, with the original The Berenstain Bears Trick or Treat, and now with The Berenstain Bears Halloween is Sweet, the board book, is that Ms. McGrizz is drawn in the original illustrations of Ms. McGrizz as a somewhat intimidating looking figure. She's a little stooped. She's got a gnarled cane, and her mouth is drawn as very wrinkled. She's got what could be interpreted as angry eyebrows the entire time, like the sort of like severe, angry, intense eyebrows, and squinty eyes. And she looks intimidating. She looks intimidating compared to the way the rest of the bears in Bear Country are drawn. And I've always appreciated that aspect of the book because they don't soften her appearance. Ms. McGrizz is very old. I think she's the oldest. Is she the oldest bear in Beartown? Maybe their Sunday school teacher. I don't know. I think Ms. McGrizz, though. I think the Witter McGrizz. No, that's another bear. The Witter, whatever her name is. In any case, Ms. McGrizz is very old, which to some little children and some older children can be very intimidating and almost frightening to see someone who is aged to the point where their face has changed, where they have facial differences from other people. Ms. McGrizz is drawn in that way. They don't soften her. She doesn't suddenly have a big sweet smile at the end. She still looks like Ms. McGrizz, but she's a very nice person. Like, she's a nice person. It's that looks can be deceiving thing that Mama is hammering home at the beginning. It's not in this new version of the book, but it's still, the drawing is still there. Like, kids will see this, and then the narration says, she's very sweet. She invites them in. She gives them some candy apples. She's very sweet. Now, I do want to point out, I think I pointed this out last time. Mama specifically says in the beginning, not in the new version, but in the beginning of the original, don't eat anything until you get home. They're clearly shown eating their candy apples as they walk home after this. Ms. McGrizz is, of course, a bear to be trusted. She's a neighbor. She's a member of the community. We know Ms. McGrizz. We trust Ms. McGrizz. Even more so in the new book, where there's never any doubt as to her intentions. But they are breaking Mama's rule. They are eating the candy. I don't think Ms. McGrizz would have poisoned these apples. I don't think there's any real threat to the kids. She is, of course, a known entity. They do, however, break Mama's rule. Shame on them. Shame. For shame. For shame on them. That's all I got to say. Halloween is a time of shame. They get home. Papa's like, did you have a good time? The Cubs say, yep, Halloween is sweet. That's the end. That's the end of the book. And Mama just sitting in her chair looking wise and mama-ish. Does this go along with how the original book went? Yeah, exactly. In the original book, they get home. It's the same 2-page spread. Papa is not aware that Ms. McGrizz is a nice person. He's like, that scary-looking old grouch puss who lives down Crooked Lane. And Brother's like, yep, that's right. You must really try to remember, Papa. Appearances can be deceiving. That's what Sister says. And Papa looks a little cowed. Now, of course, in the new version, they are not under any false notion that Ms. McGrizz is not an entirely nice person. And it just instead ends with the mission statement, I guess, of the book, which is that Halloween, pretty sweet. So let's run back to the beginning of the story. Let's run back to the beginning of the story. We've covered a few different concepts. It seems to be mostly Sister's anxiety that we're trying to assuage in the new book. Halloween is scary. Brother says, no, Halloween is exciting. Then we get, oh, Halloween isn't scary. It's fun. Then Brother says Halloween is yummy. Then Brother says Halloween is scary. Now he's on the other side of that one. And then, of course, Halloween is sweet. And that's the, I guess, final word on the subject as far as the Berenstain Bears are concerned. That Halloween is scary, it's fun, it's yummy, it's exciting, but most of all, it's sweet. It's a time of sweetness. Now, what do we mean when we say it's a time of sweetness? It's sweet time. For Mike, for Stan and Jan, that Halloween was always a very celebratory time. In the Bear universe, we know that they liked to spook it up every once in a while. Spooky Old Tree being a classic example of the Berenstain Bears liking scary stuff. Scream their heads off, the ghost in the auto graveyard. There's always been a few ghosts and goblins creeping around the edges of bear country, even up to the ice monster, even up to Big Paw, kind of an intimidating character. We have cryptids, of course, in bear country. So we've got a history here of enjoying the spookiness, enjoying the scary time of year. And Mike has, of course, carried that on. Halloween is a time of fun. It's a time of celebration. It's a time of community, as we've talked about in the past. I know I've gone on and on about it on this show before, but Halloween is a great example of the community contract. It's a social contract between children and adults, between pedestrians and homeowners or renters, that for this one night, it is perfectly okay for strangers to approach your door and ask for food. We know that historically it's tied to wassailing, that the concept of the wassail, the concept of trick-or-treating, both of those things at times happened around closer to Thanksgiving or New Year's, that those two traditions crossed oceans, crossed country borders, recrossed oceans back to places. The traditions fed into each other. So there was the concept of wassailing and trick-or-treating are inextricably tied up culturally. You can't really separate the origins of the two. The concept of a time of year when you go door to door, demanding treats out of the goodness of your neighbor's heart is intrinsic to the health of the community in these traditions, in these cultures. And Beartown is part of that. Now we remember that Beartown is a community of trust. It is a community of mutual respect. It is a community when things go correctly, it is because people are approaching each other as beings worthy of understanding, worthy of benefit of the doubt, worthy of consideration and respect, of goodness, of kindness. And that is what the original Berenstain Bears Trick or Treat teaches us. They approach Ms. McGrizz as a real person, as a neighbor, as a community member, and she treats them as in return. That she's like, yes, I am a member of this community. I'm a little more isolated. I'm older. I can't get out as much. I look different than the other bears. However, I am still a member of this community. I am still a kind person. I am still worthy of your respect. I'm worthy of your trust, and have a candy apple. That's the point of that book. This book cuts the corners a little bit off of it, shaves it down a little bit, polishes it up, makes it a little more digestible for smaller kids, but it's still the same basic idea. Halloween is a time of fun. It's not a time you should really have to worry. Being scared is fun, and being scared if you want to be can be joyful, but ultimately it is about trust. It is about approaching your community members, approaching your neighbors in a spirit of trust and togetherness, and the mutual exchange of I'm dressed up as something fun, you're giving me a treat for it. The next day, all that's done. It's November, time of oranges and time of orange and browns. But right now, it's a time of fun costumes and kids roaming the streets in ravenous packs. So that's the Berenstain Bears Halloween is Sweet. A great beginning to spooky season. I really like it. Again, it's not available in digital format. If you're going to pick up a copy, you're going to pick up a hardback copy. I had to take some pictures, use photographs in order to make this one work, but it is fine. It's fine. Pick up a copy. It's a good companion piece to the original Berenstain Bears Trick or Treat. If you've got a slightly older kids, I would say just read the Berenstain Bears Trick or Treat. It holds up well. It's a good story. But otherwise, Halloween is Sweet. If you don't have time, I guess, to read the original, this one's a lot faster. And a lot of the same illustrations. If anyone out there in Berenstain Bearland knows where that original illustration comes from, the first illustration in this book, let me know in the comments, or let me know in the comments. Otherwise, we'll be back next week with more Halloween fun. Also, I've got some Halloween cooking coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to be covering the Halloween treats from the cookbook, the holiday cookbook. So get ready for that. Also, fingers crossed, Willow and I will be covering a scary movie on It's Del Toro time, if we can ever get our schedules in sync with one another. And that's it. That's it for spooky season. The first episode of spooky season. Not spooky season. We are just starting with spooky season. So, blah, blah, blah. Welcome to Owens. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for participating in this episode of Deep in Bear Country. I am Phil, your host. And I already said the title of the show. It ruins the cadence. I'll see you all next time. Deep in Bear Country.